Hello everyone, I want to start this video off by just flat out saying, Blizzard, what are you doing? This just isn't it. I mean, all of this. So, for those of you who don't know, massive changes for the Season 1 of Diablo patch, Diablo 4 patch. There's no words for this. There is a blatant disconnect between those making these changes for nerfs and buffs and someone who actually plays the game. I mean, flat out. Like, starting out, giving us some new unique items, cool. You're putting another uber unique, whatever, these are non-existent items. They're not important. You're not going to find them. Most of the stuff they're throwing in here, okay, those are fine. They're whatever. They're not good. And then you come to, like, Sorcerer. This is one of the biggest FUs to Sorcerer, I feel like. Because right now, their class is so broken as far as, like, non-playable. Not even, like, overpowered. Just they're non-playable damn near. And then you throw in a new unique for them that allows them to evade and teleport to a random location. You know where that random location is going to be? 3 pixels to the right, or into the 15 on death effects from killing mobs. I mean, there are so many memes and jokes about this already. Those aside, the rest of them are okay. I don't think they're great, but this one might be good. But yeah, so some new legendary aspects that are meh. Again, like, they added all these things to make other builds better, but they need more than just legendary aspects, stuff like this. Like, charge calls forth 4 ancients who also charge, dealing 50 to 100% normal damage. Okay, that's cool and all, but charge is still shitty. I mean, whatever. This one seems good for the druid. I don't play druid a whole lot. Some of these are somewhat okay. I hear this one's good for rogue. Firewall build might like this, but I don't know. Massive amounts of bug fixes. Some of these are bug fixes that, well, they say are bug fixes, but are actually nerfing damage because things weren't supposed to synergize certain ways or do certain amounts of damage and whatever. So those are some pseudo nerfs by itself. Lots of bug fixes. I'm not going to go into all those. Scroll down here. Get down to the gameplay updates. Alter the Lilith, map discovery, account wide. Great, that's W. But realistically, all renown should be account wide. It is such an unfun mechanic. I don't know how many times people have to say this. Like, you guys should have learned your lesson from World of Warcraft and their team, because renown people hated that. Like, absolutely hated it. Like, yes, it's fun to do once. Ever. And that's how it should be. Like, unless that gets changed, you're going to see less and less people doing seasons. Like, this is just another unfun mechanic on top of the other 30 some odd unfun mechanics that are in this game. Like, it just blows my mind. Like I said, there's just a blatant disconnect, I feel, between people making the decision for these updates, for these nerfs, for these buffs, and someone who actually plays the game. Right? Now, they said here, they're going to up the renown for side quests and dungeons to offset stuff. Again, it's not going to fix the problem. The problem is that this is not a fun mechanic, especially since it is mandatory to have your character be at its top performance. You need skill points, paragon points, all locked behind this renown system. That is not fun to do. Added some stuff for World Tier 2, which it needed something, but again, no bonus XP, so I don't see the point. Then they go and start messing with scalings. This I like. So instead of them being on level with you at all times, they're going to scale kind of behind you a bit, which that's cool. It's going to help with the feeling of getting weaker the more you level up, so that's good, but I think this also might reduce XP with them being behind you in levels, so I'm not sure how that goes. They're upping the XP for like Whispers and stuff like that in World Tier 3 and 4. That is great. I like that. Better rewards. That's good. That's something we wanted. And then they are also just nerfing the XP from mobs in general. Like, I'm sorry, the game already is a slog. Like, hands down, this game, especially for your more casual players, most players weren't going to see level 100 as a casual player, like, in a season. Now they for sure will not hit 100. I mean, like, even I love Diablo. Like, I've been a huge fan since Diablo 1, Diablo 2. Like, I have thousands of hours in Diablo 2 from way back in the day. Thousands of hours in Diablo 3. People say that was a bad game, but it wasn't a great game, I would say, but it still had its own, like, parts that I liked, and I thought Diablo 3 was a decent game. But this leveling is so slow already, and they are nerfing the XP rates even more. And they're trying to do this to offset people boosting characters, which I kind of understand. And that's why, like, down here, I like this aspect of it, because, when there's a big level difference, then yes, you're going to get less XP. That's fine. But when you're also just screwing with the flat XP rates, it's okay. That's just gonna make the game drag on even longer. Helltides, they nerfed a lot. Right now, it's a bug that you could spend the whole time and not get enough to open up a single chest, or maybe able to open up a single chest. Now, this Torture Gift of Mysteries chest, which was the main one people would farm, upping that to 250, like, Helltide by itself, I thought was probably one of the better implemented systems in the game. It was actually somewhat fun to go and do, and it was one of the world, like, events that I actually look forward to. Now, I always wanted them to drop more cinders and have more, like, world events to drop more cinders within the Helltide zone. And now they're just making it so, I don't know, to me it feels like this is just not going to be an area worth doing anymore. So that's one less place for us to go in the open world. Granted, we still have to go there because, we need it for the resources for re-rolling and stuff like that. So now that's another unfun mechanic forced upon us, And then we get to the balance updates. The bread and butter of this annoyance. I'm not going to go through each of the classes, but each of the classes have had their skills modified. Mostly it's buffs across the board for a lot of the less used abilities, and then with heavy nerfs to the more prominent meta uses. But with that being said, they're not giving enough buffs to the other builds to offset these nerfs. So now you're going from having one or two builds that are up at the top to now, I think Barbarians hit, the highest tiers, like B tier for builds, when you could have some S tiers, some A tiers, some B, some C, just these buffs aren't good enough to make these builds better. They need more buffs. You know, these are minimal stuff. 3% to 5%. Duration increase from 1 second to 2 seconds. Like, these aren't big buffs. Like, this is probably one of the bigger buffs. Getting more resources back. You know, it's pretty much like that across the board for all the classes. And then you get to stuff like this. So the whole nerfing and buffing aspect of this whole Season 1 patch is all about nerfing defenses, nerfing dominant affixes used on gear. And that's it. Like, it is so mind-boggling just how bad a lot of this is. So, right here, this is pretty much the pair of pants that everyone would wear, you know, giving you maximum bonus armor. They are nerfing stuff without looking at why players are using this. Like, yes, players... Pretty much this is mandatory in every single build. You know, almost 100% of the players use this. But they're not looking at why. Why are they using this? Well, because resistances don't work, and they have admitted that they are broken, and it's not going to get fixed until Season 2. Which, that blows my mind in general, because that is a game-breaking bug. Literally a game-breaking bug. So when resistances don't work, the only other damage reduction we have that is consistent is armor. And that's another reason why the Sorcerer is so broken right now, is because their whole kit is supposed to revolve around intelligence giving them resistances to all elements. That doesn't work. So now they're not able to stack armor, they're not able to stack resistances, you know. All these, later on you'll see those going to be damage reduction affix nerfs across the board. So that class is literally going to start getting one-tapped. More than it already is. So, there's Butcher's Cleaver, whatever. Increase monster scaling with HP per player. So the more people you have, the harder it's going to be to kill mobs. Okay. That's annoying. You know, just they become large sacks of HP, and that's not fun. Greed Shrine, worthless, whatever. World bosses now drop more potions, whatever. No longer a limit to how many materials you can refine, that's good. So, with the item affixes, they are talking here, saying that many affixes are too efficient and are outshining alternatives. And they're looking for ways to refine the outliers, improve the numbers, blah, 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 blah. Essentially, they're adding more affixes to items that are now going to be harder for you to get the best in slot roll. Which blows my mind, because right now, they have such a inflated false sense of depth to their affix system that honestly makes no sense to me and is extremely unfun. Like, you have damage to close enemies, damage to far enemies, damage to bleeding enemies, damage to slowed enemies, damage to crowd controlled enemies, like damage to vulnerable enemies, you know, all these random ass stats, you know, with damage reduction from all of those other random ass stats too. And it's like, none of these feel meaningful. Not a single one of them. Like, I get a piece of gear and it drops, and I honestly do not care about the stats. Like, I just know 90% of the things I'm getting are just garbage. Like, like I said, there's such an inflated sense of false depth to the stats. And now they're adding more into the pools that you can get on these items. So now it's even harder to get, the only ones that actually would normally work for your builds. And then it's also going to cost so much more gold and resources because you're now having to re-roll through more and more and more. And it's like, stop. Get rid of half of these affixes. Like, condense them. Like, why do we have damage increase to slowed enemies and damage increase to crowd controlled enemies? Why are those two different things? Like, why? It makes no sense. Lucky hit chance here while you have a barrier, like barrier generation for all classes. Like, yeah, that's what we need. I mean, control impaired duration reduction, can now be on pants, which that stat by itself is so useless, I feel, in most builds, because again, the way this game is built, there are so many hard CCs in this game, and they have such long durations that if you're not building for unstoppable, then you literally cannot progress into higher and higher difficulties in this game, is what it feels like to me, And I've seen a lot of people mirror that feeling. So, again, that's pigeonholing a lot of people into very specific, fine-tuned builds to meet these criteria to be able to survive a lot of this stuff. Because you can sit there and be chain CC'd by a mob. Like, one of the better examples is those big fallen, like, overseer dudes. When you got like 30 mobs in a massive pack, sometimes it's hard to see when they do the animation where they leap up and lunge down and hit you, and that stuns you. But it stuns you for like 5 seconds. If you have multiples of those mobs in that pack, you can get hit again for another 5 seconds, right at the end of it, and continue to keep getting hit and just perma-CC. So if you don't have ways to have unstoppable, you're not going to be able to progress into higher difficulties. So, so you have a lot of these stats like that seem worthless because you're pigeonholed into these type of builds. And then we have resistance to all elements can now appear on shields. Resistances don't work. Why are you adding in affixes that do not work? And I know there's even a gem for this new Malignant Heart thing or whatever that increases resistance to an elemental type when you take damage from that elemental type. Again, why are these being put into the game when resistances are knowingly broken, and Blizzard, you have said you will not fix this until Season 2. Why? Why are these here? Like, it makes zero sense. They say here core stats bonus on weapons have been overperforming, so they're dialing back that bonus. So instead of 50% stronger on weapons, it's now 25% stronger on weapons for all of the stats, which, again, the game's built around needing your main stats, so why? Why nerf this, This is probably one of the most egregious offender to this nerfing thing. They say the cooldown reduction affix is often felt mandatory due to their raw power. We imagine cooldown reduction will remain a highly desirable stat, but the penalty for not prioritizing it won't be as harsh. So they are nerfing the amount of cooldown reduction on items by 30%. The reason why cooldown reduction is so important is because how shitty the skills are created. You have such high cooldown skills that if we don't have cooldown reduction, we literally go up, we pop all of our cooldowns, and hope to God that pack died. And if it didn't, we run around for 10-15 seconds, hoping to not die and get one-tapped, waiting for our cooldowns to come back up. So, like, they're just looking at a spreadsheet saying, hey, these are what are being used, these stats are being used, let's nerf them. Then people will use them less. I feel like that's how I feel with this. This makes no sense to me. Players want to be able to hit their skills. That is why we play games like Diablo, ARPGs in general. We want to hit our skills. We want to, do the flashy animations, blow up all the mobs. We want to have fun doing it. It is not fun to have to sit there and twiddle your thumbs to wait for your cooldowns to come back up. Like, what's the point in playing the game then? I pop all my cooldowns on this pack. Cool, I'm going to sit here for 15 seconds. Okay, let's walk around to the next pack. I'm going to pop all my cooldowns. I'm going to sit here for 15 seconds. Like, what's the point in that? That is not a fun gameplay loop, And again, here, critical strike damage, just in general across the board. They're nerfing that because, critical strike damage and vulnerable damage are often viewed as hard requirements for builds. Same thing they said up here. Like, again, makes no sense. The only one I kind of agree with is vulnerable damage. But they have made a game that is so reliant on making mobs vulnerable that if you're not running a vulnerable build, you're doing it wrong. Like, flat out. So, yes, they're now reducing vulnerable damage on items by 40%. That's a huge nerf. Players are still going to have to stack vulnerable damage because that is how you built your game, is to rely 100% on vulnerable damage because it is too strong. Like, at that point in time, they should just take vulnerable damage out and then increase the base damage across the board on everything a lot. That way, we're not focusing on vulnerable damage as a whole. But until we find an alternative for vulnerable damage, we're going to stack that. Headset died for a second. So yeah, we are going to stack that. It's going to be the main part of every build, no matter what. I mean, you have to give us an alternative to vulnerable damage. You made it too strong, just in general. So, crit strike damage, vulnerable damage again, nerfing these affixes, swords, crossbows. Again, damage to crowd controlled enemies, they're reducing that by 30%. Which, again, it's one of the only impactful affixes you have on items. So it blows my mind that they're nerfing it, but they're not giving us an alternative. That's the thing. This whole thing is such a disconnect on all of these because it is literally just looking at a spreadsheet of these are what players are using the most, let's nerf it. Maybe it'll bring the builds down. And they're not giving us options. Now they did give us an increase to frozen enemies. Cool. Not a whole lot of builds freeze from what I understand. I think just the Sork. I think that's it. I'm not 100% sure on that. So it's like, okay, whatever. That's nothing. So now they're adding in also this stuff. See, we want to support that. We're shifting power to many offensive affixes from defensive affixes. We know this will make our endgame content more deadly, particularly for those chasing our pinnacle boss, an encounter not meant for the faint of heart. Overcoming the pinnacle boss will take every ounce of grit you can muster and all tools at your disposal, blah, 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 blah. That's bullshit. Flat out. They have all of these random-ass affixes that they are increasing to offset these nerfs that they have. But most of the time, like, damage with two-handed bludgeoning weapons, damage with two-handed slashing, dual wield, range, skills that swap to new weapons, all of these are absolute dog water. And it's just more and more false depth affixes that bring nothing to the game. They just make finding the right gear and finding good stats harder. And like my barbarian, I went from like level 55 to 69, including unlocking world tier 4, and I did not find a single fucking upgrade. Like, that is probably one of the worst feelings, and it's because of stuff like this that there are so many fluff affixes that are completely worthless. Like, why? Why do we have all of this? You know, I don't get it. You know, I don't know druids and rogues well enough to know if like any of the, you know, werebear and werewolf skill damage increase stuff is viable, but I would assume not. It seems dumb. And then we now get into one of the biggest nerfs. Total armor, that stat is going to be reduced by 30%. So the only good, like, raw resistance damage reduction type stuff that works is armor. Resistances in general do not work. So now they're taking the only thing that actually does really work and they're reducing it by 30%. Okay, that's a lot of damage reduction. They're taking it away in werebear form, werewolf form. Then damage reduction from close, distant, bleeding enemies, burning enemies, poison affected, shadow over time, and damage reduction while fortified, all reduced by 20 to 25%. So, pretty much the only ways to keep ourselves alive for that endgame is by having these stats. Damage reduction from close enemies, damage reduction while fortified, stuff like that, raw armor, because there are so many one-shots already built into the game that if we do not have these, a lot of players are literally just flat die to everything. So they're making us squishier, they're reducing our overall damage in general, and they're making it harder to get the more optimized stats on items. More and more players are just going to get one shot. You know, you're not going to be able to effectively play the game. You're going to level slower, you're going to take more damage, you're going to do less damage, and I've looked over the gems and stuff like that, and none of them are game breaking enough to offset this, I feel like. And, you know, a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, you know, these nerfs are meant for season 1 and the gems will, you know, offset all that stuff. And no, because these nerfs are going into effect on the normal realm, or whatever the hell it's called, you know, and season both. So it's not just seasonal players who are being affected by this, it's everyone across the board. You know, and like I said, I looked at the gems. I don't think that any of them are really nuts. I think there's one, maybe two from Rogue and Necro that were kind of up there, but nothing that made me go, holy crap, this is going to be cool. You know? And this is the disconnect. I mean, flat out a straight up disconnect between the devs and whoever makes the decisions and the community, because they obviously don't play the game if they're making these types of changes. Like, the player base had said they wanted things harder. They don't want it unfun harder. They want a fun challenge. You know, I've said this before, there's so many unfun mechanics already built into the game. You know, for a melee character, you have so many mobs that are coded to run away from you. They are reducing that. But that's still such an unfun mechanic by itself. You have hard CCs that pigeonholes into the unstoppable builds. You know, and if we're not unstoppable, good chance we're probably going to die. You have so many abilities that are so powerful that they will one-shot you if you stand in them. And a lot of these are on death effects from mobs, and then they are stacked with multiple on death effects, and then multiple rare mobs with multiple undeath effects create a massive area that is very hard to get out of, especially when you get hard CC'd and you die. You have nightmare dungeons, who pretty much every single one of the like affixes that follow you around and do AoE damage, or have the shade that follows you around. Those are extremely unfun mechanics because they one-shot players a lot of the time. One of the better examples is the little snowflake that goes around and puts a dome, and you have to get into the dome or else you're going to die. Pretty much. When you have to get into that dome as a melee character, and every mob around you is a ranged mob running away from you, who are just sitting there taking pot shots at you from a distance, and you have to sit there and take it, and it's either step out of the dome and die, or stay in the dome and die. How is that fun for the players? Like, it was already a slog, it's going to be a worse slog. Like, Blizzard, what are you doing? What are you doing? I mean, we even go to max roll, and this is the projected top builds. 1, 2, 3 rogues and Bone Spear Necro. S tier. A tier. 1, 2, 3 more rogues and a Necro. And then we have the first werewolf build. The first druid build. We got 3 of those, which they were previously S tier with the pulverize. I thought pulverize was S tier. I guess not. Oh, I guess the tornado one was S tier. And then we have Hodo Barbarian, Whirlwind Barbarian. When Whirlwind Barbarian was S tier when the game first came out. Then you have Sword. Their only builds are B tier and down. Like, yes, these changes have brought up some builds and made some new builds and stuff like that, I feel like, and like Bloodlance Necros moved up a bit, but again, this right here, that the top 6 or 8 builds, 6 of them are rogues and the other 2 are necros, that's something wrong right there. Yeah. I don't get it, guys. Like, people are also, I know, going to say, the game just came out and, give them a break and all this stuff. I'm sorry, but no. This is a AAA company who has 30 years of game development in the same genre, in the same world, to be able to make a good ARPG. Like, this is just asinine. I mean, it is such a massive slap in the face of the player base, I feel like, that it's not even funny. Like, there are so many people. If you look at the forums right now, it is chock full of players saying, what the hell? There are so many players sitting here going, I'm not going to play this game, I'm done. Like, the only saving grace I feel like right now this game has is its story. I love the story to this game. That was absolutely fun for me. I think it is one of the better stories that they've done. I liked it a lot more than Diablo 3, for sure. But, like, that's not enough to hold over. And for a $70 to $100 price tag, this game isn't worth that money. Flat out. And realistically, I don't think this game is going to be worth playing until probably Season 6, 7, or 8. At this rate. It's just, there's too many unfun mechanics to it. It's just, it feels like to me they tried to become Path of Exile and failed. Like, there's so many things that they tried to push through, I feel like, and just didn't think. I don't know. I don't know. I honestly don't. Like, I love Diablo. I want this game to succeed. I love the universe, but this this is just painful to watch. I mean, I'm gonna do season 1 because I have the battle pass BS for it and stuff like that, and I'm gonna do that, and I probably won't touch this game for another 2 years because it's in its current state and its current direction. You know, with all the changes that keep happening to it in just the last month or so, it doesn't look good. I mean, I've yeah, I'll just continue to play Last Epoch. Simple as that. Game's a lot better. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. How you feel about this. You know, if you're annoyed also, if you think I'm full of shit, you know, let me know. But it's just, this says a lot right here. Top 8 builds, 6 of them are rogue. Yep. Balances are great. Well, thank you guys, and have a good night.